Hello, everybody. It's me, Ryan,
And I'm Katie.
and you're listening to The List, where we're continuing our top 100 countdown of the greatest films of all time and letting you know whether they're worth watching or whether you should put them on your bucket list or your check it list. Today, we are on film number 67, I believe, The French Connection from 1971, directed by Billy Friedkin and starring Gene Hackman and Roy Scheider.
Je voudrais un sandwich au fromage, s'il vous plaît.
And that is The Connection. French Connection, The List.
We've already talked about what a great group of people the French are, so we won't do that again.
We're you're making us sound anti-French here.
No.
We just said
I just don't like the French. I'm not anti. No, just kidding.
we love the French.
Yeah. I also like French fries.
They just may not like us as much.
I like croissants. Starbucks used to have this almond croissant. It was so good. It was a croissant that was filled with a almond paste, which sounds disgusting, but it was absolutely delicious.
Is that your only connection to the French?
No, I took French in high school for 2 years.
How do I not know this?
I don't know how you didn't know that.
Oh, I don't know.
But I took French in high school for 2 years, and I had this teacher that I really loved. Of course, I can't remember his name because it's been like 80 years since I went to high school. But one year he pulled me aside after class and was like, if I organized a trip to France, would your parents let you come? If the whole class did it. And I was like, no, there's no way my parents would let me come to that.
I'm glad you clarified that because I've been really creepy.
He was not inviting me alone to France. He was super kind and sweet. He was probably one of my favorite teachers, but he was like, if we went as a group to France, do you think your parents would let you come? I'm just trying to get an idea of if any of the kids are even going to be able to come. And I was like, no. And I didn't even ask my parents, but looking back on it, I bet they would have let me go. So, because I went to Ukraine just a couple of half a year later. So
yeah, that would have been a cool experience.
So kids, here's my advice. This is a life advice podcast now. My advice is never reject yourself from something. Never say no to something because you're afraid of what someone else might say or that they might reject you. Let them reject you.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah. Just to get a little warm and fuzzier. I think I sent out probably 150 query letters over the life of trying to find a book or find an agent for my book. And had I not sent all of those out, I never would have found my agent. I never would have found the person who said yes. If I would have been like, nobody's going to want this garbage book. What if they say no? I don't know why I started talking about this. A Starbucks almond croissant will do it to you.
Well, no, it's true. You miss all the opportunities if you don't take any, but there's also a lot of hard work that went behind a lot of the stuff you did too. So when those two combine and the persistence,
with these,
you can't fail most of the time.
Let's talk about Gene Hackman, one of my new favorite actors.
Well, we will talk about Gene Hackman, but first we're going to do a little summary of The French Connection.
Summarize it.
The French Connection is a gritty crime film starring Gene Hackman and Roy Scheider, who play two relentless narcotic detectives who become involved in a deadly game of cat and mouse as they go to any lengths to uncover an international heroin smuggling operation on the streets of New York. I got some fun facts about this movie.
I would love to hear them.
Much more impressed with this movie after learning all the stuff that went behind the scenes in this movie.
Is that going to affect your scoring today?
Oh, I mean, probably to some extent.
I don't know how I feel about that.
But, well, we'll talk about it. I think it is going to improve at least my wow factor for this movie.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. So, number one, fun fact number one, The French Connection was nominated for 8 Academy Awards and it won 5.
Gene Hackman won his, right?
Yeah. So, it won the Academy Award for Best Picture. Best Actor in a Leading Role went to Gene Hackman. Best Actor in a Supporting Role was nominated, but Roy Schneider did not win. Okay. Best Director did win. That was William Friedkin. They won Best Writing Screenplay based on material from another medium. Best Cinematography was a nominee, and Best Sound was also a nominee. And then they also won for Best Film Editing.
Did you know that the director also directed The Exorcist?
I did know that.
Wasn't that crazy?
I did know that. Yep. So this is pretty highly acclaimed movie at the time. Lots of awards and accolades. It was the first rated R film to win Best Picture. Number 3, it was based on real events.
Yeah, I did see that.
This movie was based on the largest heroin bust in history. At the time, they busted these criminals for $25 million in contraband in 1971.
That's a lot of drugs.
And so what did we say that calculated out to in today's money?
In today's dollars, that calculates out to $202,940,130.49.
$202 million in one
That's a
bust.
lot of drugs.
That's crazy.
That's a lot of drugs.
I had no idea that this was based on a true story at all when we were watching this. A lot of the extras in the film, especially the bar scenes, were almost all played by cops on the NYPD police force.
Very cool. I also saw that they went on like a ride along because they wanted it to feel really true.
Yeah,
to
so
life.
we'll get into that too. But yes, even the real life cops who were portrayed by Popeye Doyle, that's Gene Hackman,
Mm-hmm.
and Cloudy Russo were in the film also. They had roles.
Yeah.
They played some of the police detectives in the in the movie. So the real life people were in the movie. Actually considered them to play the main roles at one point, but eventually went with who they went with.
I wonder if they weren't good actors.
I mean, they're pretty good in the movie. I would have never known.
I didn't notice who they were.
Yeah, so it's I think he's the police captain, is the guy who in real life is Popeye Doyle.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of got blondish hair, kind of maybe 50s.
Well,
and then the other guy, you always see him in a little fedora. He's got black hair. That's Cloudy. He's one of the other cops on the case.
Not to bring up, because I know we're going to talk about this movie later. It's another top 100 movie, but I'll just say a quick thing about it. In Twilight, Stephenie Meyer actually makes an appearance and is on screen in a scene in the local.
Nobody cares. We're moving on.
in the local restaurant. She orders a veggie burger and says thank you, and you see her on camera. So that's almost the same thing as these detectives being in the movie. She
wrote the book. They lived the life and did all the stuff.
You were ready with that, Zinger.
Yeah.
I'm sending this clip
moving
to Stephanie.
On, number 5. Gene Hackman and Roy Scheider spent several weeks doing ride-alongs with the cops from this case,
for
busting
weeks?
Drug dealers to see how it was done in real life.
Do you think you'd be able to do that now? Do you think the police would let you ride along with them for weeks?
I'm sure they do it.
Do you?
Like
Yeah.
I don't think they were there like the whole weeks, but
Yeah.
like several days out of a couple weeks they went on ride-alongs and did shakedowns and busted up drug dealers and
Like, is that legal?
junkies.
Like now,
I mean,
if
they
I
weren't
were to
making
just
the
be
arrest; they were just
okay,
riding along with them, right?
yeah.
Seeing
So
how they did it.
they weren't allowed to like be like, get on the ground. They just were in the car or whatever.
No, they were there witnessing everything that was being done. Like
Yeah.
supposedly that scene in the bar where they shake down all the people in the bar there in Harlem
Yeah.
is
And throw all their drugs
almost
into a cup.
a complete reenactment of what happened on one of the ride-alongs.
That's crazy.
Gene Hackman, there's an opening scene in the movie where Gene Hackman they're kind of like take this guy and they drag him out to this kind of abandoned lot and they're kind of like shaking him up roughing him up to get information and a confession out of him. And Gene Hackman, after trying to film that scene, it took him about 22 takes to try and get that scene. He went to the director and he's like, I think you got the wrong guy.
Oh.
You need to take me out and find somebody else. And he said, don't worry about it. I think we got the right guy. And it took him a little while to get into the role of this character because I guess it was just so contrary to his like natural way of being, right?
Yeah.
And so after doing the ride-alongs and filming for a few months, they really started to be, get into the character of these rough and tough New York cops. And they went back, and it was one of the last scenes they filmed at the very end. They refilmed it, did it in half a day, and just nailed it.
Clever. I actually did read today that, do you remember Brittany Murphy?
Uh-huh.
On the set of 8 Mile when she was in Eminem's movie, she like couldn't shoot people birds. He had to like get her to work up to it. And so I do think it is interesting when you're so opposite of a character, it has to be hard to get into that mindset of playing a character who's so contrary to who you are. So interesting that after a couple of weeks or months or however long it was of him playing it, he was like, okay, now I can do it.
It took him a little while to get into the character.
Yeah.
Right. There's a term in this movie that's really strange, and I'm wondering if you know what it means. And part of it is because this is a real line that the cop would say to people to kind of throw them off balance. And it's in the movie.
Okay.
And it's the line where Popeye Doyle, played by Gene Hackman, is always saying, "Are you picking your feet in Poughkeepsie? You went to Poughkeepsie and picked your feet." Do you know what that means?
I can tell you what I think.
All right, let's hear it.
But if it's the only reason I think it is, I thought they were making fun of him because he obviously had a thing for women's shoes.
Well, that's another interesting fact. I guess the cop in real life had kind of a boot, a women's boot fetish, and it was kind of a ladies man, and
yes.
They worked that into the scene. But no, that does not have to do with this.
Okay, what does picking your feet in Poughkeepsie mean?
So, usually people with heroin addictions will shoot themselves up, usually in the webs of the hands or the feet, so that people don't see the track marks, and so they'll get sores and they'll start picking them, and so that's why he says you've been picking your feet. I don't know what Poughkeepsie has to do with it.
It probably just adds a little flair onto a very sad question.
I think it's just a way to throw them off, going, "Oh, am I about to get arrested for something I did in Poughkeepsie? What did I do in Poughkeepsie?" And then you have Cloudy Russo come in and kind of be the good cop, and so they're kind of like thrown off by Popeye, and then Cloudy comes in and gets the info they want that way.
That's interesting.
But supposedly that's a real line that he would say all the time to people when he busted them. And Number 7 is the famous car chase scene towards the end of the film where they're chasing the bad guy who's up in the train above them. One of the cars that hits him was actually a real pedestrian who was like pulling out of their driveway or something, hit him in this car chase scene. And they had to actually order 3 new cars.
Oh, God.
In order to finish this chase scene.
Well, it was worth it because that chase scene was crazy.
Oh, it's one of the best, and definitely probably the best car chase scene up to that point in film, for sure.
You guys might be real notification just went off. Do you want to take it with me on the podcast? All right, everybody on the podcast, smile. 3, 2, 1, yay!
I don't know what that is.
Be Real is a social media app where you get a notification and you have to take a picture right then. And it just encourages people to be real.
Okay.
So thank you guys for joining in on my Be Real today.
You'll have to post that up on the webpage.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, that's all the fun facts I have.
Those were fun facts.
Let's jump into the movie.
Can I add a fun fact?
Yeah, if you have one.
The heroin that they used in this movie was heroin.
Yes, it was real heroin, and it was the way that they would test it in at the time, I guess.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine that now, but
yeah, I don't think they would do that now, but I think they were able to. I don't know if they just got it from the police evidence locker and used it in the movie or what.
Somebody was joking around on Reddit and said the police were probably like, "We got tons of it laying around."
Maybe. All right. What did you think about the movie?
Overall, or the story?
Let's talk about the acting to begin with.
The acting was phenomenal. This is my favorite kind of acting. It's real people on the screen, which obviously it's not. Gene Hackman talked about how hard this was for him, that this was not in his character to act like this. It was very against the grain for him. Yet when you look at the finished product on the movie, it looks like a documentary. It looks like you're following along with these police officers as they try to bust drug dealers in gritty New York City. I think the acting was spectacular in this movie. I just feel like when Gene Hackman acts like somebody or says something, you're just kind of like, yeah, that seems like reality. That seems right. Like, I just feel like he really sells it in a really natural way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it has to do with, I feel like he's a really good yeller.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like,
it does make sense.
Like he'll be talking really smooth, and then like his voice will like escalate to like
intensity,
some sort of like intense yell, but it's done so naturally that it just sounds like something you would hear in everyday reality.
Yeah, it does.
It doesn't seem like he's acting
theatrical. At all. There's nothing theatrical about it to me. This was giving 90s documentary to me. I fully realized that it was the 70s, but just something about the feel of it was very, I don't know, very 90s to me. And I just thought,
I think that talks more towards the cinematography end of that as well, because this is definitely filmed in a style that is very iconic.
Yeah. Cop
and
style.
Pretty revolutionary for this time.
Yeah, but acting, I found no faults. I'd give the acting a 9.
Yeah, the acting's great. Really, from all the characters. Yeah, I'm thinking like 9.5.
I feel like overall this was a very straightforward surface movie, but that Gene Hackman in particular was multifaceted, and you got to see a couple of different sides of him. And it just showcased his acting very well to me.
Let me ask you, because something I've been thinking. Are these cops heroes?
No, I don't think so. I think they're very driven. I think that they have a purpose that's guiding them. But no, I don't think they're heroes. Do you?
Um, they're almost kind of like anti-heroes in a
They're
way to me,
jerks. They
because
go about it however they want to go about it.
they're doing something heroic. They're busting drug dealers, right? And trying to get drugs off the street. But the lengths that they'll go to do it, even, I mean, just that scene we were talking about where they take the guy out to interrogate him and kind of beat him up. And, they don't really seem to have any qualms about breaking the law in order to get a conviction.
I feel like
So in that sense, I feel like they're pretty. I don't even know how I'd call them gray morally. They
no,
might be
they would have
in the black morally. So I don't know.
There is zero doubt in my mind that especially Popeye would have done anything to catch the drug dealers or their source. Anything. Especially once they start layering into the story that he's made a bad decision before that cost a police officer his life.
Mm-hmm.
You start to see that he's really driven by not only making a big catch, but by redeeming himself. There was no world in which he was going to let these guys go, and it didn't matter what the cost was. So no, I'm definitely going to go with not hero.
Yeah, it's not the white knight on the horse for sure.
Yeah,
but they're interesting, multifaceted characters, the both of them, because they have their little quirks, they have their own sense of justice, but they're also will bend and sometimes break the rules to do what they think is right.
Yeah, and so then can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Were you ever rooting for them, really?
Yeah, I think to some extent, but at some extent I was just like, I don't know. I think there's some sort of commentary there as far as some corruption in the police department and stuff. I think that's a kind of a layer in on this film, and we see that, I think, also reflected in the cinematography. So let's just weave into that.
We just talked about story. Honestly, do you?
Well, let's weave into the cinematography, and then we'll go back to the story.
Okay.
I think we see this in the cinematography reflected because, it like you said, it's a documentary style film. It's very grainy. It's dark. It's very gritty. We have all these scenes where you just see the ugly parts of New York, right? There's trash everywhere. There's abandoned lots. There's drugs. There's junkies. And then the final scene, especially, is like the grossest, nasty hellscape that you can even possibly
Aren't they like
imagine
down
in
in
that situation.
Sewer?
No, they're just like in this building that's just absolutely filthy, full of mud and guck.
Yeah.
And just thinking about it, I'm just like, ugh, I would hate to even step in this place, let alone act and trot around in it.
And I could smell it
the
because
whole
I
movie's
remember
like this, and so your characters are kind of a reflection of that too. Like they're these guys who go out and try to do what's good, but this dank, dirty, disgusting city has kind of brought them down to that level to survive in this harsh concrete jungle type of feel to me. So I think the cinematography and the story and the characters are woven into that mesh so beautifully, really, that it all just drives home a point there.
What would you score it?
So let me go back. So acting, I said 9.5. Cinematography is a 10 for me. It's high. It's really high. I don't really appreciate a lot of gritty realism, but like because it intertwines so beautifully with all the other elements of the story, it elevates it a lot. It's really great. It's really great. And just the guerrilla style, documentary style, camera work is pretty amazing. Something that wasn't really done in that time.
Yeah, and I remember quite a bit of the filming was shaky camera work, but not in that same way of the movie I had to walk out of that one time, Cloverfield. It wasn't that kind of shaky. It was like someone walking and holding a camera kind of shaky. And that really does get you into this. Like it's one of the very first shots, I think, is kind of a shaky shot. And it really gets you into the mood and the setting of the movie. And I think that the cinematography probably does the heavy lifting in this movie for me. It was great cinematography. And I think I'd give it a 9.
Yeah, I think I watched the interview with the cinematographer and the editor, and he was talking about how this is like the only film that he's ever edited that he was while he was actively editing and looking through the film, that like he could tell that there was something special just from the scenes that they were getting, like no dialogue, anything like that. And it set such a mood and a character for the film that it's really uncomparable to any of the other films that he's ever done.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Story wise, what did you think about the story?
It was a good story. It was a little slow for me in points. That it was a little bit of a slow middle to me, where I was eventually like, all right, let's get to the resolution. Once we got to them seizing the car and then hopefully finding what they were looking for, that's when it started to ramp up again for me. But I do think there were a couple of spots where it could have been tightened, and maybe that was maybe that's what gives it the vibe that it has. But I was just a little bit bored. But that car chase was incredible. It was funny. It was such a well-written movie. There were so many one-liners, like when he says, if that car's clean, I'll open up a charge account for you at Bloomingdale's or something like that. And just the way it's delivered was so funny, and the way it was written was so funny. And I also feel like this is more cinematography and acting, but I did want to say I also loved the way that they talked in this movie. There were a couple of times where I almost got Nashville vibes, but I do think that story-wise, it was it was really suspenseful in a couple of parts too. And that was done really well. Had me on the edge of my seat in a couple of spots.
I don't know if I agree. I don't know if we watched the same movie, because I was not bored at all. Actually, from the very beginning of the movie, where the murder happens in the very beginning, to the chase scene where he's in his Santa Claus suit chasing criminals.
Did you know he actually did that in real life? They would dress up as Santa and ring the bell twice when the person was there, and they'd arrest him.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but I was not bored really at all at any part in this movie. If anything, I was less invested in the character story and more invested on how they were going to catch these guys.
Really?
Yeah. That was the interesting part to me that kept me going. And then, just all the high action and stuff like that. So, maybe that's just the guy in me that likes an action packed thriller.
I don't know, because I think you're right. I think this was, very fun to watch. You're right. There were so many scenes that were just a joy to watch.
Supposedly, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but supposedly that one chase scene where they're in the subway and the French Godfather keeps popping in and out of the train, and he keeps following him, and then he just kind of waves at him at the end. Supposedly that happened in real life, where he waves at him because he knows he's following him.
That is such a good moment in this movie.
That's a really good scene. It's super intense.
And you're
cat
like,
and mouse game there.
Yeah, there were a lot of really great scenes in this movie.
I
But
will
yeah, I was
say
bored a
the
couple of
only
times.
downer for me for this movie was I felt like we built up, and then the end was kind of anticlimactic to me,
Yeah, I agree.
to say the least.
Yeah.
So that was the only thing that brought this film down for me, enjoyment wise, story wise. Otherwise, I really liked it. I'm going to say like 8.5.
I'm going to give it an 8.
Okay. What about the wow factor?
That chase scene is a wow factor for me, which I guess would fall under cinematography. But the way it just seemed so real was incredible. It's very realistic. He's running into things. His car's all beaten up. He's looking at the train and then looking at the road and realizing he's about to crash into somebody. It just goes back to that whole documentary style of filming. It was very realistic. This was like the opposite of Die Hard. Super real and gritty and believable. And the chase scene, which is probably one of the most intense things I've seen, um, it managed to be intense and crazy, but at the same time realistic. So I think that's the wow factor for me, and I'd give it a 7.5, an 8. I'm going to go with an 8 actually.
Okay. Yeah, wow factor for me is definitely the cinematography. Just all of it, you know, the grittiness, the scenes of pure filth and disgusting.
Yeah.
And then that chase scene is pretty amazing. I think that alone elevates my wow factor really high. And then just knowing all the stuff that they had to go through to like get to this point in the film and how their acting developed, those are all really wow factors for me. I think mine's going to be a little bit higher. It's probably going to be about a 9.3.
Okay.
So pretty high up there. Is this a top 100 movie for you?
Yeah. I don't know that we're going to run into any more not top 100 movies. Yeah, this is a top 100 movie for me.
Yeah, I think this is a top 100 movie as well. Is this a bucket list movie?
No, it's a good movie. I think it's an example of shining cinematography. No, it's not a second thought for me. No, this is not a bucket list movie.
Okay.
What about you?
No, I don't think it's a bucket list movie for me either, but really, really liked it still.
Yeah, me too. I felt like this was something that would be on ABC Family in the 90s, and I would be like hanging
ABC
out.
Family?
Yeah. And I would be like hanging out, and it would be like 11:30 p.m. and my parents would already be asleep, so I snuck out to the couch with a bag of chips and I turned on the TV really low, and this would be the only thing playing, and I would watch it for 20 minutes, and then there would be 8 minutes of commercials, and then I'd watch another 20 minutes, and then there would be 8 minutes of commercials. It just gave me that vibe. I don't know why. So if you or a loved one saw this on ABC Family, if you or a loved one saw this on ABC Family, please write in and let us know.
Maybe ABC, but not ABC Family.
Yeah.
All right, should we rank it?
Yeah, let's rank it. Okay, so my list starts with Green Mile and ends with Close Encounters. I do think The French Connection is better than Close Encounters.
Is it better, or did you enjoy it
But
more?
did I enjoy it more? I enjoyed Close Encounters more. And I enjoyed City Lights more, and It Happened One Night, and A Place in the Sun. So actually talking through that, I'm going to leave my list the way that it is. Nothing's moving for me today.
All right. So I have also The Green Mile as number 1. Number 10 right now is City Lights for me. I actually enjoyed The French Connection better than City Lights, but not better than It Happened One Night. So I'm going to bring that French Connection to my number 10 slot, actually.
I respect that. However, I'm jonesing for a fight. I feel like we need it. Like, we've been agreeing too much.
Well, I'm sure we'll get there.
We need a divisive movie to get some content.
I thought this was going to be more divisive because you kept going. You're like, are you enjoying this?
I was bored.
Are you? And I was like, I was not bored at any moment during the movie.
Well, there were scenes that were so outstanding, it kept me hooked. But then the in-betweens, I was just like, oh, the French guy again?
See, those didn't even bother
Enough
me
with
either. I
him.
actually like those.
But man, those scenes that were good enough to keep me hooked and enjoy the whole movie.
Can we just talk about a spoiler for a second?
Yeah.
Because I have a rant.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Ryan's
Spoiler.
gonna rant.
Danger. Okay. Can we just talk about the ending of this movie?
What ending? What ending to this movie?
It really ticked me off.
There was no ending.
I know. So, like, you go in and he's in this disgusting building hunting down one of the criminals. He ends up killing one of his own cops on accident.
Yeah.
And then he goes off and chases the bad guy who he thought he saw in another corridor. And you hear some gunshots. And then the film just ends.
Who got shot?
You're like, what happened? Did he kill him? Did he capture him? Did he get shot?
Yeah.
Like, it was so annoying to build me up to that moment and then not let me freaking know what happened.
Did you know they wrote a song about that?
Who?
Build me up, buttercup baby,
goodness.
just to let me down.
So, I mean, that's my only qualm with this movie.
It's a big one, though.
It ticked me off. Like, I think this movie would be ranked much higher if they would have given me some sort of ending.
Yeah.
It's almost like that Alfred Hitchcock moment in North by Northwest where they build up all the suspense and then they go, oh, we're over budget. We got to end the film right now.
Yeah.
And
train coming through.
It annoyed the crap out of me.
Yeah, it's very unsatisfactory.
To have such a good movie and then just to do that.
Right.
It's just like, hey, let's just stop.
Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah, because you as a
I don't
viewer
have to have a happy ending. I just have to have an ending.
You as a viewer have invested however much amount of time into this art that this person has created and into the world that they've populated, whether, whatever medium that is, movie, TV, book, whatever. So for there not to be a satisfactory ending, it's like a promise has been broken between the creator and the viewer who purchased and spent their time on the product. You make them a promise when you begin a story that you're going to end it in a satisfactory way. You don't promise it's going to be happy. You don't promise that they're going to be thrilled with the ending, but you promise that things will be resolved. And that didn't happen here.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my qualm. Let me know what you guys thought about that one because it really irked me.
It did. He wasn't happy.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for joining us to talk about The French Connection. We're so excited to talk about Bonnie and Clyde next week with Faye Dunaway and Gene Hackman. And
shouldn't be throwing out names if you don't know them.
And Clyde. So you can join us next week to discuss this movie. We will be so excited to talk at you then. Everybody have a lovely night. Thanks for joining us. Bye.